Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about a setting within the nodes within n8n, basically the on error setting. So we're going to be setting up what happens when this node errors. And by default, the setting is just to stop the workflow. As you can see here, the first example we're looking at is the workflow stops. So specifically within this HTTP request node, if you click on settings, we can see right here on error. So action to take when the node execution fails. Default is just going to stop the whole workflow, stop the whole execution, but this can also be really bad. So you've got a couple options here. You've got continue, which basically just means even if one item errors, it's just going to continue running. It'll just output that one item as an error or null. And then you've also got continue using error output. So this means it's basically going to, out of this HTTP request, it's going to branch out two ways. Everything successful is going to go one way, and everything that errors is going to go the other way. So honestly, I think this should be the default setting for pretty much all your nodes. But there's a use case when if something does error, you probably want the whole thing to shut down. So um, that's just my 2 cents. Anyways, so we're going to keep this on stop workflow, and I'm going to show you guys what this looks like. So all we're doing here is this is just code that has three URLs. So we're going to be looking at mcdonalds.com, chipotle.com, and then a fake URL that's not going to work. So we're going to test this. We'll see it's going to loop through each of those URLs. And we got an error, so the whole workflow stops. The idea here is that once the loop is done and we've scraped those websites, it's going to continue down this logic over here and extract out the information, put it into an article, whatever we're looking for. But as you can see, we ran it. We had three items and we got nothing out of this branch. There's no information in here, undefined. And if we look into the HTTP request, we can see that run 1 was scraping McDonald's. We got HTML back. Run 2 was scraping Chipotle. We got HTML back for Chipotle as well. And then run 3 is where we got the error, which is why it shut down the whole execution. So that's default. That's what it's going to look like. And now let's go down to example number 2, which is we're going to do, the workflow is going to continue. So same exact thing. We're setting McDonald's, Chipotle, example.com, except for in here, we're now doing continue. So once again, this is continue on error. This is not continue on error using error output. This is just going to have the workflow continue. So let's run this one. It's going to loop through those three URLs again, scraping all the websites. As you can see in here, out of the done branch, we have these three items. And if we look at the first one, actually, no, let's go in here. Pretending the rest of the logic is going on this way. So as you can see already, this is the first website. This was McDonald's. Second website was Chipotle. And then example.com, we hit off that request. It errored because there's nothing there to scrape, really. As you can see here was the error message 404. 400s is always bad. Apologies if you can hear my dogs barking, by the way. And so that one comes back null because there was no actual data to scrape there. So that's useful because now it's not going to shut down the whole workflow. It's still going to go through. Let's say we had 100 URLs to scrape, but 2 of them fail. We're still going to get back data. But now there's a scenario where we potentially want to be able to see what happens with or which ones failed, or maybe even send them off a different way. We can notify the user, hey, by the way, these following URLs failed, or whatever it is. So as you can see now, we have 3 items here. We have done, loop, and error. And in the previous ones, we just had done and loop. So obviously what's going on here is in the settings, we have this one on continue, but then we changed the loop to on error, continue using error output. And so this is just the way I like to do it because I played around with doing it here and then there would be an error output over here. But I just, for some reason, I liked the way having the HTTP request just continue would feed back an error message to the loop, and then the loop would feed back an error URL. Not saying this is the best way or the optimal way, but it works. So let me just show you guys what that looks like. We're going to loop through. 1's going to go through. 2's going to go through. And then as you can see now on the done route, we have 2 items, and on the error route, we have 1 item. So once again, this is going to be McDonald's and Chipotle with HTML that's come back. And then we've got error URL, which is the URL right here. I just set this one to the actual URL that's coming back rather than like the actual result from the URL. Because if we clicked into run 3 loop branch, this is the error, this is the URL, and then we're basically getting no data back. Similarly, if we clicked into the actual HTTP request to see what information is coming back from example.com, we're getting the error 404. And then, of course, the previous 2, we're actually getting HTML. So just a quick tip, which is something that in, maybe your standard agent workflows isn't super essential. And maybe that's the reason why it took me a while to actually really understand what the setting was and find out about it because I didn't have to use it too much in my standard agent builds. But when you really get into creating multi-agent frameworks where you have multiple agents talking to each other, it could be really helpful to be able to switch this to continue or even continue using error output, because that way, we at this point we understand that, let's say this agent was being called by another agent, and the workflow is going through in the sense that something comes in over here. Actually, let me just visually show it out real quick. So usually when we're calling another agent, actually click the wrong button, sorry. When we're calling another agent, it gets triggered by this execute workflow. So where'd that go? Okay, over here. So let's say we have a personal assistant and this is an email agent that's being called. We're going to get the query in, it's going to hit the agent, it's going to do something. And then usually what we do is we respond to the agent, and we do that by setting a field to, response. And then we're calling that response usually like JSON.output, which is usually what the agent actually is outputting. So now we have the trigger and then we have the agent responding. But let's say there's errors happening with these tool calls and we need to understand that. Or even, errors coming over this side, somewhere there's errors. We could now have an error branch, which we can once again set this to response. So this is just what the main agent that's calling this one is going to be looking for. And we can say error in email agent workflow, like try again, or, notify. We could have this tell the main agent to hit a function called request help, and it would notify the human that there's been an error. There's so many things you can do. You can also change the error message. So I've shown before, like if a query is not even coming through, you can have a set or like an if right here. We're just checking, does a query exist in this trigger? If yes, go to the agent. If no, respond to the main agent and say, hey, you didn't send over a query. Can you please try again? So you can basically have those steps everywhere. And by having, let's say the process is going to end over here with a Gmail node. And what we want to do is potentially, let's just say we're getting a message. As you can see, we could also do continue error using output. So continue on error with an output. So, we hit the agent, it's doing its task, and then we're sending it through. It's going to grab emails, and then maybe we want the emails to be respond to the main agent. So, we'd say response, and then we'd set this to, the output of that email node that we just were getting emails. So output of email node, right? And then if it's erroring, we can do the same thing once again, and we can say, email, we could say like failed to retrieve emails. Please try again, or we could say please call request help tool, which would essentially maybe ping the human on Slack or text them and say, hey, we're getting an error in here. So after every single step of this process, you could work in this logic, and you're going to have a lot of purple pencils over your workflow. But that's how you make this stuff really, really smart and robust to the point where error handling. When something errors, can your workflow basically overcome those errors and learn from what it's doing in order to fix itself? Because, sometimes, like with there used to be a bug a few n8n versions back where when you were passing data between different workflows, nothing would come over in this query. And so I had set these little things here that would say, does query exist? If no, I'm going to set a response field that says no query exists, send it back or try again. And then, maybe 2 or 3 times later, the main agent would actually send a query. So just being able to have that sort of feedback loop between agents and how they talk to each other can be really cool, because that's how you, like I said, that's how you make the workflows actually sort of production ready, because they can handle stuff like that, and they're smarter than just kind of these static automations, which is the whole reason why we want AI to be involved in our automations anyway. So I'll have this workflow tagged on this video for download, just so you could get in here and you could just see what's going on. It's a pretty simple concept, but sometimes being able to click test workflow and watch the stuff actually happen in real time can be a little more helpful. That's how I learned a lot, was playing with n8n templates available for download from the community templates. So I'll do that, but hope this tip helped. Any questions about it, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next Loom.